Hey, it's Jeff Zito, and thanks for checking out another episode of the Celebrity Jobber Podcast, one of the top shows on the Apple Podcast music podcast charts. Not only streaming on Apple Podcasts, also Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Please subscribe. Would love a 5-star rating, leave a review, and check out past episodes up on celebrityjobber.com. This guy is so impressive for a few different reasons. I don't know much about Marvin Young. I do know that he had a huge song back in 1989. And other than that song, I don't know much about Marvin. Although after talking to him for a little bit, he is extremely intelligent, and there's no doubt in my mind that this guy would have been successful even without the big rap song, which, by the way, he performed under a stage name, Young M.C., and of course, best known for his 1989 hit single, Bust a Move, ultimately reaching the number 7 position on the Billboard Hot 100 back in 1989. Now, once again, you're going to figure out real quick that if it wasn't for rap, that this guy would have been successful doing something else. We'll find out what he thinks he might have done if not for rap. We'll talk about his big break, of course, his first jobs, and what's Young MC doing these days. His name's Marvin Young, but you know him as Young MC, and he's my guest this week on Celebrity Jobber.
The Celebrity Jobber Podcast with Jeff Zito. If you like what you hear, please subscribe, give a 5-star rating, and leave a review. Check out all our past episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you pod. What if these celebrities weren't famous? What would they have become? What was their first job? We're about to find out.
It's great to have you because, you know, you've got such a great story. It's such a cool thing. You got a new song out, and you tell me, Young MC, you tell me, is the fun part of your life right now because it's all gravy? I mean, what is this new song of yours about? Tell me about it.
Well, it was something that came up with a conversation that I had with a DJ friend of mine, DJ Debonair, shout out to him, about the more you try and say in a song, you know, if an artist tries to be preachy, the less gets across to the audience because they really are not coming to music to be preachy. And he said, that's what I like about your stuff, Marvin. You cut through the BS and you get to the fun part. And as soon as he said that, I'm like, that's a song. And I went to my hotel room, woke up the next morning, wrote most of the song, and then knew what kind of track I wanted and went ahead with it. And to answer your general question, your first question, I think it is more of a fun part for me now because I have the knowledge of what the business is like. I've gone through, my journey, and also I have the skill and experience to make the music, being on stage in front of people. There's not a ton of stuff that's going to surprise me. And I know also how to kind of stop and smell roses at certain points. So like when Bust a Move got to 37 on the Billboard charts, I was probably running around doing something, not being able to stop and look at that and see what kind of an accomplishment that was. Right. But now I can. You know, and I have the ability and the hindsight to do so. So that's enjoyable for me.
Young MC, this is such a great story too because you're a very intelligent guy. You can tell it. You can figure that out within 3 seconds of a conversation with you. And I found out that you went to high school at Hunter College. High school, yeah. And Hunter College High School is on the Upper East Side of Manhattan, and it only accepts the top 1/4 of 1% of students in New York City, which is based on test scores. So what were you...
testing, yeah, absolutely, yes.
So what were you trying to do when you went to high school? And, you know, obviously, rap is a dream. Becoming a star, I should say, is a dream. What was your focus on in high school when you were going to go to college? What did you aspire to grow up to be?
You know, no one has really looked back and asked me that. That's fascinating. Okay, I'm happy to discuss this. When I went to high school, now Hunter College High School goes from 7th grade to 12th grade. So I had 1 year of regular junior high school, and then I took the test and I got in, and I want to say 3,000 kids took the test. About 220 to 250 got in, and only 188 or so graduated after the 6 years. And to put it in context, context, Justice Elena Kagan went to my high school.
Oh, wow, okay.
Lin-Manuel Miranda went to my high school. One of my classmates is an executive producer of Big Bang Theory and Young Sheldon. I mean, I have some really impressive people just in my circle, going to my high school. I didn't know what I wanted to do in college until I had a professor named Mr. Marienhoff who taught me economics in high school. Then I decided that I wanted to be an economics major, and within that I wanted to specialize in microeconomics. So personal finances, small business finances, not government, not massive, corporate, finances, but actual almost an extension of household finances and how economics affected regular life. That was my approach. And then when I went to school, when I went to USC, I studied economics, had a bachelor's in economics, minor in data processing, which was the computer thing of the day. So BASIC, COBOL, Fortran, all those languages. And after sophomore year, that's at USC, I came back getting ready for junior year, and I read lyrics over the phone to the guys that owned Delicious Vinyl, and I was signed by Delicious Vinyl right before my junior year started at USC.
Celebrity Jobber. The Celebrity Jobber podcast with Jeff Zito.
How did you have a relationship with the guys at Delicious Vinyl? How did that phone call come to be?
Okay, so I was very musical in high school. I DJ'd my own prom. At 13 to 14 years old, I would be traveling on the train to a record store in Manhattan called Rock and Soul. It's still there. It's an iconic record store. The basement of that, and it really was an electronics store. Like the top floor had electronics. If you wanted to buy a boombox or some speakers or an amp, you'd get that on the top floor. But you went down to the basement, and that's where the records were. So we're talking about like the beginning of Def Jam Records, that I would literally go down, and anything I saw with a burgundy label with a tone arm on it, I would buy it regardless of, before I even heard it, just because it was the Def Jam record. So the Beastie Boys had a song called Cookie Puss. That was their first release, and I just bought it because it was on Def Jam. So there was a guy that worked in Rock and Soul. His name was Eric. I was supposed to make some demos with him in the summer of 1987 for a record company called Get Busy Records that in this point I don't even know existed. But we tried to we made the demos. Nothing ever came of it, but he said, I know these guys that are starting a record company in California. And it was Michael Ross and Matt Dyke, and that was Delicious Vinyl. I flew back and was in my dorm room or campus apartment at USC, and I called the Delicious Vinyl guys up, and they were both on the phone, and I read lyrics to them, about 4 verses. And after reading the 4 verses, they literally sent me a contract in the mail a couple weeks later. I was a student senator at USC, so I was taking 18 credits, which was heavier than the 16. Yep. And I got the contract, and long story short, I took the contract to the representative of the law school at USC. Couldn't afford a lawyer, so I had the law school representative of the of Student Senate look it over, and he's a law student, obviously. So I had him look it over, and he could only do but so much, so I ended up signing the contract.
Wow.
So that's a long-winded way of giving you your whole story.
But that's an incredible story. I mean, that's first of all, a lot of people don't know about the economics direction that you could have gone in. And what about your parents, Marvin? What kind of business? Tell me a little bit about your folks. You moved to New York City when you were just a kid. They're originally from the UK, correct?
Jamaica.
Oh, they're originally from Jamaica.
They're originally from Jamaica, and they moved. The migration at the time that me and my sister were born, the migration from Jamaica was not to the U.S. The natural migration was to the UK because Jamaica was a British territory.
Okay.
So my parents actually, I'm pretty sure my parents met in the UK, had me and my sister, and then came to the U.S.
And what kind
of... My mom was a nurse.
Okay.
Okay. My mom was a nurse, and my dad worked for what we call now AT&T, but it was like the Bell Corporation. And I forget what the full name was, but he worked essentially for the phone company in New York as an executive. So he wore a suit to work every day. So I saw that. I saw that work ethic in both of them. And also, I barely had babysitters as a kid. My mom would work nights. She worked the night shift. She worked 11 to 7. And my dad would work days. So my mom would get home in the morning. My dad would leave for work. And that would be, how me and my sister was raised. Now, the interesting thing is seeing that work ethic, seeing how much they did to make sure that they provided for me and my sister. It kind of put a lot of things in perspective for me. Number one, they wanted me to go to school. My mom especially wanted me to go to college. So I made sure that I did all that, but I made sure that I had my hobbies, and music was my hobby. So when I graduated USC, let me think. This would have been May of '89. So my parents basically gave me the summer to get the music out of my system.
Okay.
And unfortunately for them, or for that, Bust a Move came out finals week of senior year, and I toured that whole summer. And by Christmas by Christmas of that year, I was close to platinum.
Wow.
And then by the next February, I had a Grammy and American Music Award.
So they probably, right in the beginning, not very supportive, but they probably said, hey, look, we'll give you the summer. Go ahead, get it out of your system.
Right.
And then by the end of the going platinum, they probably came around a little bit and was like, okay, I guess you can make a career out of this.
What made them come around more than anything was I think both of their coworkers, but I think my mom's coworkers in particular, because she worked nights and it was hard. It's hard doing those shifts. And a coworker looked at her and said, "Why are you still working? Your son's famous. You should be able to leave."
Ah.
And when they heard that from a coworker who was not in my musical demographic, mind you,
right?
They hear that from one of their peers at work. They're like, "Oh, well maybe this thing Marvin is doing is real," because we're talking pre-internet. We didn't have cable in the house, so they're only going, and they're not, sitting there reading Billboard and R&R. They have no idea what's going on in the stuff I'm telling them. They think, okay, a kid's going to lie a little bit to make it seem better than it actually is. But I'm like, no, this music thing is actually working. So,
the Celebrity Jobber Podcast with Jeff Zito. Celebrity Jobber.
What about your first job, Marvin? How about before all of this? Can you remember your very first job and what it was?
All right, there's a couple. I didn't do a lot of retail stuff or whatever. I was a bank teller at the Chase Bank. I had an aunt who was an executive at Chase. So I remember being a bank teller. I think my last year of high school, and then my first 2 years of college, I was a ticket taker and an usher at the Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum, which is walking distance from USC.
Okay.
So while I was recording, I had that job, 18 credits, and student senate. It was an incredibly heavy schedule, but I'm so good at compartmentalizing, and I like that because if I was having, not even a writer's block, but just to give me relief from the artistic side, I would do the schoolwork and, then do the usher job. And the student senate was something that would give me relief from the artistic stuff if I was stuck there. So being able to compartmentalize was something that I've kind of taken into my adult life. Is
there a particular moment that you remember in your life? Maybe it was seeing yourself on TV for the first time. Maybe it was that phone call with the guys from Delicious Vinyl. Is there a particular moment that is so vivid in your mind because it changed your life, or maybe a big break, if you will? But can you remember a specific moment where you're like, to this day, wow, if this didn't happen, maybe I wouldn't be talking to this strange guy asking me all these weird questions about myself?
And you know what? I can't really say it was something singular. On an artistic level, it would be working with, not only the guys that produced Bust a Move, but like the Dust Brothers produced Know How and a couple records for me. And I was one of the first artists they had worked with before they went on to do a lot of big productions. So being able to be a witness and a participant in that kind of musical creation. I had QD3, who was Quincy Jones's son, the late Quincy Jones, God rest him. He had produced a track for me, and I was able to sit around and see some of that genius, and also just the musical approach, because I had not only had QD3 produce a track for me, but I had gone to a USC with Martina Jones, who was Quincy Jones's daughter. So just that, and that was something even outside of the record label. These are people I would have known if I wasn't, that I would have known if I wasn't signed. So, that being able to go to the White House, meeting Prince, there's so many different things that I could say that, they were positive reinforcements to say, okay, I belong here and I should be doing this. So to answer your question, it's really a lot of moments. It's not just one singular moment, because I try my best to put myself in a position where I can benefit from a lot of things as opposed to making all the chips ride on one bet.
The Celebrity Jobber Podcast with Jeff Zito. The Celebrity Jobber Podcast with Jeff Zito.
Man, 22 years, right? Since this, when this song
charted.
This song came out in, I want to say 1989, right?
Yes.
You had an incredible ride. This is a movie. You know what I mean? Like, your life is a movie. And I know you know this. I mean, because just the way that you tell me these stories, I mean, you can tell that that you agree with me. Tell me what's been going on with you for the last 20 to 25 years. What's been going on with you? Have you been constantly making music? Have you been doing other things? Do you have other interests, other business opportunities?
Well, I was making music up till about, let's say, 2011 or so, and then the touring got really heavy. So there have been various tours. I found myself on the road a lot more in the 2010s than I was in the aughts, if you will.
Uh-huh.
So I found myself on the road a lot more, and that kind of culminated with this I Love the 90s tour that's still going now. And when I signed my record deal, and when I was even coming up and even into the mid to late 90s, I felt that the music, selling the music, making records was the kind of meat and potatoes of of my career, and that touring would be, garnish or dessert or whatever, not the backbone of it. And since the early 2010s, it's pretty much been that touring has been the backbone of it. And that's probably, coincides with things going to downloading and streaming, less emphasis on physical product, less emphasis on the album. And also the demographic of people that were, kids in 89 all, started spending money and wanted to go see some of their favorite artists in concert. So I jumped on those tours, and the I Love the 90s tour has been a culmination of that. And then we have, NBA halftimes, NFL halftimes, those kind of performances, which were wonderful experiences. But those are things that weren't as available to me in the late 80s and early 90s.
It's been so great talking to you. New song. It's called Fun Part, and I understand it's currently on the Billboard charts, currently number 37. So he's charted.
Yeah.
He's charted. How many years later is this? Is this like 25 or 35 years later?
22 years since I've charted with a song called Heat Seeker in 2002.
So 22 years since that song charted. 35 years since Bust a Move, which I don't even want to think about because that makes me feel old. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you, man.
But think about that movie and go, hey, that guy told me I should make a movie. You should, because it's a great story.
Well, I'm thinking about it, but you know what? The more of these interviews and podcasts and stuff I do, I'm getting the movie out and then the book out, kind of one interview at a time. So it'll end up that the stories all get out there, but it's still interesting because people are consuming it so much that I'm happy to communicate my story with your audience.
That's
Absolutely.
Awesome. Young MC, Marvin Young. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, man.
Well, he was a bank teller. That was his very first job when he was in college. He talked about being a ticket taker at the LA Coliseum, had that job all while having a full load of courses at USC, not to mention member of the Student Senate. This guy's pretty remarkable. Got his record deal his junior year at USC as he rapped over the phone to a couple of record execs at Delicious Vinyl, who he had a relationship from back in the day when he lived in New York. He said he would have probably got into the world of economics pretty pretty smart guy with numbers. As we mentioned earlier in the interview, he went to a high school in New York City that only accepted the top 1/4 of the top 1% of test scores in New York City. Think about that. The top 1/4 of the top 1%. Wow. And basically, his parents, born in Jamaica, lived in the UK for a little while before moving to New York when Marvin was just a kid. Not real supportive on a rap career, but it seemed like as their friends noticed Bust a Move on the radio and on MTV, I guess they came around as soon as it was Marvin's parents' friends who were commenting on their son's success. He says there was no singular big break, no big moment that, kind of happened all at once. It was just kind of a series of events. He talked about working with Quincy Jones' son. He talked about working with the Dust Brothers and, of course, signing that record deal while rapping over the phone in his college dorm room at USC. All these things kind of led for, him to explode with that song Bust a Move. And one thing that I was kind of thinking about, too, being so smart and being into economics as such a young man and thinking he may have gotten into that world if it wasn't for rap, I can't help but think that, after Bust a Move and he made the money that he made and being so smart in economics, he probably invested that money very well a long time ago and since has had zero financial issues to worry about because of his intelligence with numbers. I should maybe hire this guy to be my financial advisor. It's a great story, and one of those stories that you could definitely make a movie out of. So we'll see if he ends up doing that. He says, he's kind of thinking about it, so we'll see. Another great episode of Celebrity Jobber. Again, all my past guests you can check out on CelebrityJobber.com. You can also follow YouTube.com/@CelebrityJobber, Instagram CelebrityJobber_podcast, streaming on all podcast platforms. So please subscribe. Would love a 5-star rating and leave a review. Now, it's just like one big break or a series of little breaks that separates a regular guy like you and me from a celebrity. Who knows? Marvin Young, he might be a financial advisor working for some private equity firm, if not for writing the hit single Bust a Move back in 1989. So there you have it. Another episode is in the books. As always, I thank you for listening. I thank you for making this one of the top shows on the Apple Podcast music podcast charts. Grateful for everyone's support. Thank you so much. And until next week with another new episode of Celebrity Jobber, we'll see you then. I'm Jeff Zito.